I'll never forget the night it happened. It was supposed to be simple, just dinner with my fiancé's family. But that night burned itself into my memory like a scar. The night I realized I wasn't welcome. The night they laughed. It was a Thursday evening when my fiancé, Daniel, called from work. "Babe," he said, his voice casual, "Mom wants us to come over for dinner this weekend. She says she wants to get to know you better. My sister will be there too. Dad's grilling steaks." At first, my heart leapt. Dinner with his family? That was a big step. We'd been engaged for 3 months, and while I'd met them briefly before, this would be the first real family dinner. "Really?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "That sounds nice." Inside, I was panicking. What would I wear? What would I say? I didn't come from money, not like they did. Daniel's family lived in a big house in the suburbs, with a 3-car garage and a chandelier in the dining room. My parents had always lived paycheck to paycheck, and I was proud of the way I'd learned to stretch a dollar. But I knew his family didn't see it that way. The next day, I went thrift shopping. Some people wrinkle their noses at thrift stores, but for me, they're treasure chests. With a little patience, you can find pieces that look just as good as designer, if you know how to look. And I did. That day, I spotted it on the rack, a soft navy blue dress, with a flattering cut that hugged my waist and flared at the hips. Modest neckline, elegant but not flashy. I held it up in front of the mirror, smiling. It wasn't new, but it was beautiful. And it only cost $18. Perfect, I whispered to myself. When I got home, I ironed it carefully, hung it by the closet, and paired it with my simple pearl earrings. It wasn't flashy, but it was me. Saturday came. As we pulled into Daniel's parents' driveway, my heart hammered in my chest. The house loomed in front of us, all brick and glass, with perfectly trimmed hedges. Inside, the smell of steak and garlic butter drifted through the air. The dining room gleamed, polished wood table, sparkling crystal glasses, silver cutlery that looked like it belonged in a museum. Daniel's mom, Patricia, swept in first. She was tall, elegant, dressed in a cream-colored suit that screamed money. His sister, Victoria, followed close behind, her designer handbag swinging from her arm. And then, their eyes landed on me. "Olivia," Patricia said, her smile tight. "So glad you could make it." Her eyes flicked up and down my dress, pausing for a beat too long. Victoria let out a tiny laugh, the kind of laugh people give when they're trying to hide it, except she didn't try that hard. "Cute dress," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Vintage?" I forced a smile. "Yes. I found it at a little boutique." "Boutique," Patricia repeated, her lips curling. "How quaint." Daniel didn't say a word. He just shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his collar. I felt my cheeks burn, but I sat down, reminding myself, stay calm. "You're here to make a good impression." Dinner started, and at first, the conversation was harmless. Work, hobbies, vacation plans. But then Patricia leaned in, her eyes glinting. "So, Olivia," she said sweetly. "What do you do again?" "I'm an assistant at a design firm," I answered, smiling. "We handle interior design projects." "I love it." Victoria smirked. "Assistant. So not the actual designer?" "No, not yet," I admitted. "But I'm working toward it." Patricia sipped her wine. "Ambition is important." Of course, Daniel has always had ambition. He deserves someone who can match that. Her words were sharp, like knives hidden under silk. I stabbed my fork into the steak, chewing slowly, pretending not to notice. But inside, I was breaking. It happened halfway through dinner. Patricia leaned closer to Victoria, her voice just loud enough for me to hear. "She looks like she got that dress from a bargain bin." Victoria covered her mouth, giggling. I thought the same thing. The sound of their laughter echoed in my ears, drowning out the clink of cutlery and the hum of conversation. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. The steak suddenly tasted like nothing. I looked at Daniel, praying he'd defend me. But he just stared at his plate, silent. In that moment, I felt small. Invisible. Like a child being scolded. Every instinct screamed at me to stand up, to shout, to run. But I didn't. I swallowed hard, forcing the food down, forcing myself to smile, forcing myself to play the part of the polite fiancé. Because I knew one thing, explosions burn fast, but patience lasts longer. So I sat there, my heart pounding, my hands trembling under the tablecloth, and I let them laugh. But inside, a seed was planted. A seed of revenge. As dinner ended, Patricia raised her glass in a mock toast. "To Daniel and Olivia," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "May ye always remember that a real bride deserves to shine." Victoria giggled, leaning close enough for me to hear. "She'll never look like a real bride." The laughter stung like salt in a wound. But I smiled, clinking my glass gently. Because they didn't know. They didn't know I'd already decided. When the time came, I wouldn't just shine. I'd blind them. If your future in-laws laughed at your dress and said you'd never look like a real bride, what would you do? Bite your tongue like I did, or call them out immediately? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more sweet revenge stories like this. When I got home that night after dinner, I barely made it through the door before the tears came. I kicked off my thrift store heels and collapsed on the couch, clutching a pillow to my chest like it was the only thing holding me together. Their laughter still echoed in my ears. "She looks like she got that dress from a bargain bin. She'll never look like a real bride." I buried my face in the pillow, trying to muffle the sob that escaped my throat. Daniel came in a few minutes later, loosening his tie. "Olivia?" he asked cautiously. "What's wrong?" I sat up, tears streaking my cheeks. "What's wrong?" "Daniel, your mother and sister laughed at me. At my dress. At me. And you just sat there." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Liv, you're overthinking it. That's just how they are. They joke. Don't take it seriously." "Don't take it seriously?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "They humiliated me at dinner, Daniel. Your mom toasted to you having a real bride. How am I not supposed to take that seriously?" He sank into the armchair across from me. "Look. I know they can be harsh. But that's just them. If you want to marry me, you have to accept them too." The words hit me like a punch. So that was it? He wasn't going to defend me. He wasn't going to stand up to them. I wiped my eyes, nodding slowly. "I see. But inside, I thought, maybe I can't count on you. But I can count on myself." That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Patricia's smirk, Victoria's giggle, Daniel's silence. A storm of thoughts spun in my head. Am I good enough? Am I making a mistake marrying into this family? Should I even go through with the wedding? But another thought cut through the noise, sharp and clear: I won't let them define me. Slowly, my tears dried, replaced by a quiet determination I hadn't felt before. The next day, I distracted myself with errands. Groceries. Laundry. Scrolling on my phone. But then something caught my eye, an ad for a designer boutique. It said, "Charity clearance event. Luxury gowns at unbelievable prices. Limited stock." I almost scrolled past it. But something in me paused. Luxury gowns. Clearance event. I clicked. My screen filled with photos of dresses, real designer gowns, the kind Patricia and Victoria worshipped. Gowns that usually cost thousands, now listed at fractions of the price. My heart pounded. Was this real? I read the fine print. The boutique had partnered with a charity and accidentally printed extra vouchers. Instead of recalling them, they honored the discount to clear stock. In other words, gowns worth fortunes were now within reach. And just like that, the seed of revenge sprouted. I closed my eyes, letting myself imagine it. Walking into my wedding, every guest turning, gasping. Patricia and Victoria's faces frozen in shock. Their whispers twisting into awe instead of mockery. The same people who once laughed at me would be speechless. And the best part? I wouldn't have to say a word. My gown would do the talking. I smiled for the first time since that dinner. I scrolled through the options, my fingers trembling. There it was, a gown unlike anything I'd ever seen. White silk, delicate lace sleeves, a train that flowed like water. Timeless. Regal. The price? Still expensive, but within reach because of the charity voucher. I bit my lip. Could I justify it? I'd always been careful with money. Always frugal, always the one who saved instead of splurged. But then I remembered Patricia's words, a real bride deserves to shine. Fine. I would shine. I clicked order. As the confirmation email arrived, I whispered to myself, they'll never see this coming. Over the next weeks, I kept my plans secret. When I visited Daniel's family, I wore my same simple clothes. I let them smirk. I let them whisper. At brunch one Sunday, Victoria leaned across the table, smirking at my cardigan. "So, Olivia, what will you wear for the wedding?" "Another boutique find?" Patricia chuckled. "I do hope you don't embarrass us, dear. Guests will be expecting class." Daniel tried to change the subject, but I just smiled. "Yes," I said calmly. "Guests will see exactly what they expect." They thought they'd rattled me. But really, I was laughing inside. Because I already knew how the story would end. When the gown finally arrived, I locked the door, drew the curtains, and opened the garment bag like it was treasure. My breath caught. It was even more beautiful than the photos. I slipped it on, the silk cool against my skin, the lace hugging my arms. I turned in the mirror, watching the train glide across the floor. For a moment, I forgot about Patricia. About Victoria. About the laughter. I saw myself, radiant, strong, breathtaking. I twirled slowly, whispering, "This is who I really am." That night, as I hung the gown carefully in the back of my closet, hidden beneath old jackets, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't rush my revenge. I wouldn't lash out. I would wait. I would let them keep laughing, keep mocking, keep underestimating me. And then, on the day that mattered most, I would walk in, silent but shining, and let the truth slap them harder than any words ever could. The thought made me smile as I drifted off to sleep. Because for once, I felt in control. What would you do if your in-laws mocked you before the wedding? Would you confront them, or wait for the perfect moment like I did? Share your answer in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more sweet revenge stories on this channel. Patience. That became my secret weapon. I used to think revenge was all about dramatic moments, shouting, storming out, flipping tables. But I was learning something new. Revenge could be quiet. Revenge could be a smile. Revenge could be letting people dig their own grave while you stand by, taking notes. And so, for the next few weeks, that's exactly what I did. 2 Sundays later, Daniel and I joined his family for brunch at a fancy cafe downtown. The place had white tablecloths, crystal glasses, and a menu so overpriced it made my stomach tighten. I wore a pale yellow sundress I'd found at Goodwill for $7. It was cheerful, simple, and comfortable. I thought I looked nice. But of course, Patricia and Victoria didn't see it that way. The moment I slid into the seat across from them, Victoria tilted her head, smirking. "Oh, Olivia, that's cute," she said, dragging out the word. "Very simple." Patricia dabbed her mouth with her napkin. "Yes, dear. Simple is one word for it. But don't you worry. Once you're married into this family, we'll make sure you understand proper presentation." Proper presentation. As if I were some project to be fixed. I forced a polite smile, but inside, my heart burned. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, Victoria, can we just enjoy brunch?" Patricia waved him off. "We're only helping, darling. Olivia needs guidance." I looked down at my menu, biting back my words. Guidance. Right. But instead of arguing, I just smiled and ordered my eggs. Let them think they'd won. Later, as we finished eating, Victoria leaned forward. "So, Olivia," she said, her voice dripping with sugar, "what are you planning to wear to the wedding? Please don't tell me, another thrift store find." Patricia chuckled. "Yes, darling. Guests will expect elegance. We can't have anyone whispering about the bride." The hypocrisy nearly made me choke on my coffee. "As if you don't whisper about me already." I sipped calmly and said, "Don't worry. Guests will see exactly what they expect." Patricia smiled smugly, clearly misinterpreting my words. But inside, I laughed. If only you knew. On the drive home, I turned to Daniel. "Why don't you ever defend me? Why do you just let them talk to me like that?" He gripped the wheel tighter. "Liv, you take things too seriously. That's just how my mom and sister are. They tease. Don't give them so much power." "Tease?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Daniel, they're humiliating me. They don't respect me." He sighed. "Look, once we're married, they'll come around. Just let it go." I leaned back in my seat, staring out the window. Let it go. He didn't get it. He might never get it. But that was fine. Because I wasn't planning to let it go. I was planning to make them regret every single word. At another dinner the following week, Patricia accidentally dropped a stack of bridal magazines in front of me. Glossy covers with models in gowns worth tens of thousands. "These are the kinds of dresses real brides wear," she said, smiling sweetly. "Not, well, you know." Victoria giggled, flipping through one. This one would never fit her budget. They laughed together, sipping wine. I sat perfectly still, my fork poised over my plate. Inside, my blood boiled. But outwardly, I smiled. "Those are beautiful," I said softly. "I'm sure guests will be impressed no matter what the bride wears." They smirked, convinced I was admitting defeat. But inside, I was laughing. Because I already had my gown hanging in the back of my closet, hidden beneath jackets. A gown that made their glossy magazine covers look cheap. At night, when Daniel was asleep, I'd slip into the closet and unzip the garment bag. I'd pull the gown out carefully, running my fingers over the silk, the lace, the train that flowed like water. I'd step into it, feeling it hug me perfectly, and I'd stand in front of the mirror. In the dim glow of the lamp, I looked like another person. Confident. Radiant. Untouchable. I'd twirl slowly, imagining the gasps, the wide eyes, the silence that would fall when I walked into the wedding in this gown. And then I'd whisper to myself, patience. Wait. Let them underestimate you. The longer they laugh, the harder they'll fall. One afternoon, I stopped by their house to drop something off Daniel had left. Victoria was lounging in the living room, scrolling her phone. She glanced up, smirking. Olivia, you know Mom's worried about how you'll look at the wedding. We don't want our guests thinking you're cheap. I bit my lip. I'll be fine. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Honestly, if you embarrass us, I'll never forgive you. And Mom won't either. You'll ruin everything. Her words were meant to scare me. Instead, they thrilled me. Because she had no idea how wrong she was. But even as I held on to my secret, doubt sometimes crept in. What if the gown didn't look as good in public as it did in my mirror? What if people still laughed? What if Patricia found some new way to humiliate me anyway? One night, I sat on the edge of my bed, my gown draped across my lap, and whispered, "Am I doing the right thing?" But then I remembered Patricia's smirk, Victoria's giggle, Daniel's silence. And I nodded. Yes. This is the only way they'll ever learn. The week before the wedding, I tested my patience one last time. At dinner, Patricia glanced at my blouse, another thrift find, and said loudly, "Don't worry, Olivia. I'll make sure we take plenty of photos from the waist up. That way, no one will notice." Victoria snorted into her drink. I felt the room watching me, waiting for me to break. But instead, I smiled, lifted my glass, and said, "Thank you, Patricia. I'm sure the photos will be unforgettable." Daniel frowned, sensing something in my tone, but he stayed quiet. Inside, my heart thundered with anticipation. Unforgettable indeed. Every insult, every smirk, every giggle, they didn't weaken me anymore. They fueled me. I started to see their laughter as bricks. And brick by brick, they were building the stage for their own humiliation. All I had to do was wait for the curtain to rise. Would you keep your revenge gown a secret like I did, letting the insults pile up, or would you shut them down immediately? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more revenge stories on this channel. The morning of my wedding started quietly. I woke up before the alarm, lying still in bed, staring at the ceiling as sunlight poured in through the curtains. Today was the day. Not just the day I married Daniel, but the day I proved his family wrong. I sat up slowly, my heart already racing. Most brides probably feel nervous about vows, about walking down the aisle, about the forever waiting at the altar. But me? My nerves were about something else. Patricia's smirk. Victoria's giggle. The whispers I knew they'd throw around today like confetti. I could already hear them in my mind. What will she wear? Probably another thrift store find. I pressed my hand against my chest, studying my breath. Let them laugh one more time. Because when the curtain finally lifted, they'd choke on their own words. My plan was simple. I wouldn't show up in the designer gown right away. No. That would be too easy. Too quick. Instead, I'd wear something plain. Something forgettable. Something that screamed cheap. That way, they'd relax. They'd laugh. They'd underestimate me again. And then, when the doors opened and the music swelled, I'd reveal the truth. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was art. The venue was a beautiful old church with tall stained glass windows. As I pulled up, bridesmaids waiting outside waved, their dresses a soft lavender that caught the light. I stepped out of the car in a plain floral sundress, my hair pulled back simply, a sweater draped over my shoulders. I saw the flicker in their eyes, confusion. Concern. Ah. Olivia, my maid of honor, Claire, whispered. That's not the dress, right? I smiled calmly. Don't worry. This is just my arrival outfit. Her shoulders sagged with relief. Oh, thank God. For a second, I thought you lost your mind. I chuckled softly. Trust me. They'll lose theirs soon enough. As the morning rolled into noon, guests began to arrive. The church filled with chatter, laughter, and the rustling of clothes. From the corner of my eye, I saw Patricia and Victoria glide in, both dressed to the nines. Patricia in a pearl-colored gown, Victoria in crimson silk. They spotted me across the hall, still in my sundress. Patricia's lips twitched into a smirk. She leaned toward Victoria, whispering something that made them both laugh. I didn't need to hear the words. I already knew. But instead of flinching, I smiled back sweetly, lifting my hand in a small wave. They blinked, caught off guard. Then turned away, whispering again. Perfect. Later, as I passed them on the way to the dressing room, Patricia stopped me with a soft hand on my arm. Olivia, dear, she said, her voice silky. I do hope you've prepared something appropriate for the ceremony. Her eyes slid down my sundress pointedly. Victoria giggled. Yeah, because this isn't exactly the fairy tale look. I smiled politely, my heartbeat steady. Don't worry. I have it handled. Patricia arched a brow. We'll see. Her voice carried the smugness of someone who believed she'd already won. Inside, I wanted to laugh. Oh, Patricia. You have no idea. In the quiet of the bridal suite, I finally exhaled. The gown waited for me, hidden in its garment bag, draped carefully across the chair. I walked toward it slowly, my fingertips brushing the zipper. Not yet. Not yet. I had promised myself I'd wait until the last possible moment. For now, I sat down, sipping water, listening to the muffled sounds of guests outside. My bridesmaids fluttered around me, adjusting their makeup, whispering about the excitement. But my mind was sharp, focused. Every insult, every smirk, every laugh played back in my head. And with each memory, I felt calmer. Because I knew exactly how this would end. There was a soft knock on the door. Olivia? It's me. Daniel's voice. Claire opened the door a crack. You can't see her yet. I know, Daniel said, chuckling. I just wanted to check if she's okay. I stepped forward, standing just out of sight. I'm fine, Daniel. Good, he said warmly. I know Mom and Victoria can be a lot. But today, it's about us, okay? Forget them. His words were sweet. But I couldn't forget. Not yet. Thanks, I said softly. I'll see you at the altar. When he walked away, I whispered to myself, and they'll see me too. The hours ticked by painfully slow. Makeup. Hair. Photos. Every moment, I kept glancing at the garment bag, itching to reveal what lay inside. But I forced myself to wait. Patience. That word pulsed in my head like a drumbeat. Just before the ceremony began, as guests settled and the music started to play softly, Patricia peeked into the bridal suite. Her eyes swept over me in my sundress, still sitting calmly. She smirked, leaning close enough for only me to hear. "Don't embarrass us, Olivia. Remember, this family has standards." Victoria, just behind her, added, "Guests will never forget this wedding, one way or another." They laughed softly, then walked away. I smiled to myself, whispering, "You're right. They'll never forget it." Finally, it was time. The bridesmaids lined up. The flower girl clutched her basket. The music swelled louder. I slipped into the dressing room one last time, closed the door, and turned to the garment bag. My hands trembled as I unzipped it slowly, revealing silk and lace that shimmered in the light. I stepped into the gown, my bridesmaids gasping behind me. "Olivia," Claire whispered, tears in her eyes. "You look like royalty." I turned to the mirror. There she was, the bride they said I'd never be. Not thrift store. Not bargain bin. Regal. Stunning. Unforgettable. I smiled at my reflection. Now it's my turn. If you were me, would you have baited them with a plain outfit first, or just revealed the gown right away? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for sweet revenge stories on this channel. The moment I slipped into the gown, the world changed. The sundress I'd worn earlier pooled in a heap at my feet, forgotten. The cheap fabric that had been mocked, the simple cardigan that made Patricia smirk, all of it was gone. In its place, silk flowed over my body like liquid light. Lace hugged my arms. The train trailed behind me, whispering across the carpet like a secret. I stood still, barely breathing, staring at my reflection. This wasn't just a dress. This was power. Behind me, the room went quiet, then exploded in gasps. Claire pressed her hands to her mouth, her eyes shining. "Olivia," she whispered, you look like a queen." Another bridesmaid, Jenna, blinked rapidly, fanning her face. "I've never seen anything like it. Where did you even get this?" I smiled softly. "Let's just say, they'll never expect it." Claire laughed through her tears. "Oh, they're going to choke when they see you." Their excitement wrapped around me like a hug, giving me strength. I turned back to the mirror, studying every detail. The way the silk shimmered when I moved. The way the sleeves framed my arms. The way the train seemed endless, like it belonged on a runway or in a palace. And my face wasn't the same. For weeks, I had looked into mirrors and seen a woman doubting herself. A woman who replayed insults. A woman who questioned if she was enough. But now? Now I saw strength. Confidence. A woman who knew her worth. I whispered to my reflection, "This is who I really am." As I stood there, flashes of memory surged through me. Patricia's smirk, proper presentation. Victoria's giggle, another thrift store find? The toast, "A real bride deserves to shine." Each word had stung like a knife. But now, they felt like fuel, feeding the fire that burned in my chest. I smoothed the gown over my waist, my fingers trembling. "You said I'd never look like a real bride," I murmured. "Well, watch me." The bridesmaids fluttered around me, adjusting the veil, smoothing the train, snapping photos on their phones. But my focus was sharp. Out there, Patricia and Victoria sat smugly among the guests, probably whispering even now. They had no idea what was coming. And the thought made me almost giddy. Jenna leaned in, her voice low. "Olivia, can I ask you something?" "Of course." She bit her lip. "Why didn't you just wear this from the start? Why put yourself through their insults these last few weeks?" I smiled faintly. "Because patience makes revenge sweeter." If I'd shown this too soon, they'd just adjust. They'd still find something to laugh about. But now? Now they're so sure I'll fail, so sure I'll embarrass them, that when they see this, it'll crush them harder than anything I could say. Claire nodded slowly, her eyes gleaming. You're brilliant. There was a soft knock. 10 minutes, the wedding coordinator called. Everyone ready? My heart leapt into my throat. This was it. The moment I'd waited for. Claire fluffed my veil gently, whispering, "You're perfect." Jenna adjusted the train. "It's like it was made for you." I gripped my bouquet, my knuckles white, trying to steady my breath. This wasn't just about walking down the aisle. It wasn't just about marrying Daniel. It was about reclaiming every ounce of dignity they had tried to strip away. I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply. "Patricia," I whispered to myself. "Victoria." You laughed. You mocked. You doubted me. I opened my eyes, locking on my reflection again. Now it's my turn. The coordinator opened the door, gesturing for us to line up. Bridesmaids first. Flower girl next. Then me. I stepped into the hallway, the gowns train sweeping behind me like a declaration. Guests turned their heads as I passed, their whispers starting already. But I kept my gaze forward, my expression calm. Patience. The curtain hadn't risen yet. We reached the great wooden doors of the church. The music inside shifted, signaling the procession was about to begin. My bridesmaids walked in, one by one, their lavender dresses glowing in the light. The flower girls skipped ahead, scattering petals. And then it was just me, standing at the threshold, my hand trembling on the bouquet. I could hear the hum of voices beyond the door, the rustle of guests shifting in their seats. Somewhere in that crowd, Patricia and Victoria were waiting, probably rolling their eyes at the thought of me walking in cheap. I almost smiled. Because they were seconds away from learning the truth. The coordinator leaned close. "Ready?" I nodded, inhaling deeply. I thought of everything, the dinner humiliation, the brunch insults, the glossy magazines, the whispers, the smirks. And then I thought of my gown, shimmering like armor around me. I whispered to myself one last time, they'll never forget this. The doors creaked open. Light poured in. The music swelled. And I took my first step forward. If you had the chance to stun people who mocked you, would you bait them first like I did, or walk in shining from the start? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more sweet revenge stories. The heavy wooden doors of the church opened slowly, and I stepped forward into the light. The organ began to play, filling the entire space with deep, echoing notes that made the walls seem to vibrate. Sunlight streamed through the tall stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the pews. Guests shifted in their seats and craned their necks toward me. And then, silence fell. The whispers stopped. The laughter faded. All eyes locked on me. I took another step, my gown shimmering under the glow of the sun. The silk caught every bit of light, making me look almost ethereal. The lace sleeves framed my arms perfectly, and the long train glided smoothly across the aisle like it was floating on air. Gasps rose from the guests, soft at first, then louder. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Look at that dress," another voice hissed. "Is that?" "No, it can't be," a guest stammered. I kept walking slowly, my eyes fixed on the altar ahead, but I could see the faces turning pale in the corner of my vision. When I finally let myself glance toward the front rows, I saw Patricia and Victoria. Patricia's mouth hung slightly open, her wine-red lips frozen in shock. Victoria's eyes were wide, her hand gripping the edge of the pew as if she needed to steady herself. The smirks that had haunted me for weeks were gone. In their place was something I had waited to see: disbelief. They leaned toward each other, whispering furiously, but I was too far to hear the words. It did not matter. I knew what they were saying. Where did she get that dress? How is this possible? The murmurs spread through the crowd like a ripple in a pond. That's couture, I'm sure of it. Isn't that a Vera Wang design? No, that's a Monique Louillier. I saw it in a magazine. Impossible. That gown costs more than my car. The entire room buzzed with awe, disbelief, and curiosity. The same people who might have whispered about my cheap choices before were now speechless. Every step I took made my gown shimmer more, and every shimmer silenced another whisper of doubt. I finally looked at Daniel, standing at the altar. For a moment, I almost laughed. His face was a perfect mix of shock and guilt. He had heard his family's insults and had never once defended me. But now he was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. His eyes were wide, his lips parted slightly, and his posture stiffened as if he had suddenly realized he had underestimated me too. Our eyes met, and I held his gaze calmly. This wasn't just about Patricia and Victoria anymore. This was also about him. Inside, my heart was pounding like a drum, but outwardly, I remained calm. I walked with steady steps, my veil trailing behind me, my bouquet held firmly in my hands. My face was composed, almost serene. Because this wasn't about gloating. This was about power. This was about reclaiming the dignity they had tried to steal from me. I remembered the brunches, the dinners, the whispers about my cheap clothes. I remembered Patricia's smirk when she dropped bridal magazines in front of me. I remembered Victoria's giggle when she asked if I would show up in another thrift store dress. And now here I was, walking down the aisle in a gown that made their own designer outfits look like knockoffs. The contrast was delicious. As I passed the pew where they sat, Patricia could not help herself. She leaned toward Victoria and muttered, louder than she probably intended, "Where did she get that? This makes no sense." A few guests nearby turned their heads, frowning at her lack of discretion. I kept my eyes forward, my lips curling into the faintest smile. I did not need to answer her. The silence of the crowd and the admiration in their eyes answered for me. The organ swelled louder as I neared the altar, the music rising like a wave. My gown shimmered with every step, and the whispers in the crowd rose again. Some guests reached for their phones, trying to snap a picture without being obvious. Others simply shook their heads in disbelief. I walked like I had all the time in the world, savoring every second. Every insult I had endured transformed into fuel for my stride. Finally, I reached Daniel. He blinked, still staring at me, as if he could not quite believe what he was seeing. You look incredible," he whispered as he reached for my hand. I smiled faintly. "Thank you." But inside, my thoughts were sharper. You could have defended me weeks ago. You could have stopped them. But instead, you let them laugh. And now you see the truth. The priest cleared his throat, trying to regain the attention of the crowd, but the whispers continued. Even as he began the ceremony, people could not take their eyes off me. I stood tall, my shoulders back, my chin lifted. This was more than a wedding. This was my victory. Patricia and Victoria shifted in their seats uncomfortably, their faces tight. Every time a guest leaned toward them and whispered, "She looks stunning," I could see their discomfort grow. They had wanted me to look cheap, unworthy, like an embarrassment. Instead, I had stolen the spotlight completely. They were the ones embarrassed now. As the vows began, I barely heard the words. My mind was on the bigger picture. This wasn't just about a dress. This was about respect. They had tried to strip me of it, but I had taken it back, and I had done it without shouting, without begging, without fighting. All it had taken was patience, timing, and one perfect gown. By the time the priest invited everyone to sit, the whispers had begun to fade. But the awe lingered. Guests were still sneaking glances at me, still shaking their heads in disbelief. I squeezed Daniel's hand, my face calm, my eyes steady. This was only the beginning. Because I knew I still had one more move left, the toast. If you were in my shoes, would you have stayed calm and let the dress speak for itself, or would you have turned to your in-laws and confronted them directly in front of everyone? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. The ceremony ended, and applause filled the church. Daniel and I walked back down the aisle hand in hand, but I knew the real performance had not even begun. The gown had already stunned them. I could feel the weight of their stares, the whispers that trailed us as we left the church. But now came the reception. Now came the moment where I would turn their own words into a blade, cutting without raising my voice. The reception hall was decorated with white roses, soft candlelight, and gold-trimmed tablecloths. Guests buzzed with excitement as they took their seats, waiters gliding around with trays of champagne. When Daniel and I entered, the room erupted into cheers. Glasses clinked, people shouted our names, and the photographer's camera flashed like fireworks. But I kept my eyes steady. I did not look at Patricia. I did not look at Victoria. Not yet. Dinner was served, laughter filled the air, and for a while, everything seemed ordinary. People complimented the flowers, the food, and the music. But I could feel it. The tension. The way guests kept sneaking glances at me, whispering about the gown. The way Patricia sat stiffly in her chair, her fork clinking too loudly against her plate. The way Victoria avoided eye contact altogether, focusing far too intently on her wineglass. Every minute that passed only built anticipation for what I knew was coming, the toasts. Daniel stood first. He tapped his glass with a fork and smiled warmly. "Thank you all for being here today to celebrate our marriage," he began. "I am the luckiest man alive to have Olivia by my side." He spoke sweet words about love, commitment, and our future. It was a good speech, and the guests clapped enthusiastically when he finished. But I could tell his family wasn't fully listening. Patricia's eyes flicked nervously between me and the guests. Victoria kept sipping her wine as though it were her shield. They were waiting too. Then it was my turn. I rose slowly, smoothing the gown with my free hand, my champagne glass sparkling in the other. The room quieted almost instantly. Guests leaned forward, eager to hear what I would say. I cleared my throat, my voice steady but gentle. "First of all," I began, "thank you all for being here today. It means the world to me to look around and see so many faces of people who matter to us. Today is not just about marriage. It is about love, respect, and dignity." I paused, letting the words sink in. I continued, "A few weeks ago, I had dinner with my future family. I was so excited. I wanted to make a good impression. I wore a dress I was proud of, a dress I had found at a boutique, one that made me feel confident." Whispers rippled through the room. Patricia shifted in her seat. Victoria froze, her wineglass halfway to her lips. But during that dinner, I said, my voice calm and even, I was laughed at. My dress was called cheap. I was told I would never look like a real bride. The room went silent. Patricia's face paled, her smile tight. Victoria lowered her glass quickly, her hands trembling slightly. I took a slow breath, then smiled. And yet, here I stand today. In a gown worth more than this entire reception. A gown that I did not beg for, did not borrow, but earned. A gown that reminds me of one thing: no one has the right to decide what makes a woman a real bride. Gasps filled the room. A few guests clapped instinctively, then stopped, unsure if it was appropriate. Others nodded, their eyes wide. Patricia's face flushed deep red. Victoria's jaw tightened. I raised my glass higher. I have learned something important. Dignity does not come from price tags. Respect does not come from designer labels. And love comes from believing in someone even when others laugh. I looked directly at Patricia, then at Victoria. Their faces froze. So tonight, I continued, my smile sharp, I toast to never underestimating the quiet ones. Because sometimes the people you laugh at are the ones who shine brightest in the end. The room erupted in applause. Guests stood, clapping and cheering. Some shouted, "Hear, hear." Others raised their glasses high, echoing my words. Patricia sat rigid in her seat, her lips pressed together so tightly they nearly disappeared. Victoria looked down at her plate, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. And me? I stood tall, my gown glowing under the chandeliers, my champagne glass raised proudly. This was not just a toast. This was justice. As I sat back down, Daniel squeezed my hand, his eyes wide. Olivia, that was incredible. I smiled faintly. Thank you. Guests swarmed around us afterward, offering compliments. Your speech was powerful, one aunt said. You looked stunning, another whispered. And every compliment was another dagger for Patricia and Victoria. They had wanted me small. They had wanted me humiliated. Instead, I had turned their cruelty into my spotlight. As the night went on, I danced, laughed, and celebrated. Guests snapped photos of me in the gown, telling me I looked like royalty. Everywhere I went, I was surrounded by admiration and respect. And all the while, Patricia and Victoria faded into the background. For once, they were the silent ones. If you were standing at that reception, would you have given the speech I did, or would you have stayed quiet and let the dress speak for itself? Share your answer in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more sweet revenge stories on this channel. The reception carried on late into the night, but for me, everything felt strangely calm. The gown still shimmered under the lights, the champagne still sparkled in its glasses, the music still pulsed through the floor. Guests laughed, clapped, and danced around me. Yet, inside, I felt something far more powerful than excitement. I felt peace. For weeks, Patricia and Victoria had tried to strip me of my dignity, piece by piece. They had mocked my clothes, laughed at my choices, and whispered behind my back. Every insult had been like a thread pulled from a seam. But tonight, I had sewn myself back together with stronger thread, and now I was untouchable. After the toast, the compliments came in waves. Aunt Clara leaned over during dessert and whispered, "You spoke with such grace, Olivia." That was the perfect balance of truth and dignity. A family friend clasped my hand tightly. "You made your point without raising your voice. That is strength." Even the photographer chuckled as he adjusted his lens. I've seen hundreds of weddings, but this dress, this moment, this one will stick with me forever. Each compliment was like a soothing balm on the wounds they had left on me. Each smile reminded me that their laughter had never defined me. Patricia barely spoke for the rest of the evening. She sat rigidly in her chair, her fork poking at her untouched food, her lips pursed into a thin line. Her pearls gleamed around her neck, but her pride had dimmed. Every now and then, a guest would glance at her with raised eyebrows, and she would force a smile that never reached her eyes. I did not approach her. I did not need to. Her silence was the loudest apology she would never say. Victoria, who had once been so quick to giggle at my clothes, spent the evening staring into her glass of wine. She avoided conversation, her shoulders hunched, her face pale. At one point, I caught her eye across the room, and for a moment, she looked like she might speak to me. But then she dropped her gaze and turned away. And that was fine. Because I had no interest in hearing her excuses. Daniel stayed close to me most of the evening. He kept glancing at me, his expression soft and thoughtful. "You really surprised me today," he admitted as we danced. "Not just the dress, but the way you carried yourself. You were incredible." I smiled faintly. "You could have defended me, you know. Before tonight." His face fell slightly, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I know. I should have. I'm sorry, Olivia. I thought ignoring them would make things easier. I didn't realize how much it hurt you." I held his gaze. "It did. But tonight, I proved I don't need their approval to be strong. I hope you understand that now." He nodded, tightening his grip around my hand. "I do. I promise I'll never stay silent again." Time would tell if that promise held, but for now, it was enough. When the night ended and the last guests left, Daniel and I drove away in silence. The city lights blurred past the window, and my gown rustled softly against the leather seats. For the first time in weeks, I did not feel small. I did not feel mocked. I felt powerful. And in that quiet car ride, I realized something important: the revenge had not been about them at all. It had been about me. Patricia and Victoria had laughed at me because they thought they could. They believed their wealth, their designer labels, and their smugness gave them permission to treat me as less. But I had learned that dignity does not come from what others say. It comes from how you choose to respond. I could have yelled. I could have cried in front of them. I could have stormed out of that dinner weeks ago. But I chose patience. I chose silence. I chose to let them believe they had already won. And because of that choice, when the moment came, the fall was harder, sharper, and unforgettable. The gown now hung in my closet, its silk still glowing even in the dim light. To anyone else, it was just a beautiful dress. But to me, it was a weapon. It was proof that I had taken their laughter and turned it into applause. It was a reminder that no one, not even family, has the right to define my worth. And every time I glanced at it, I felt the same calm strength I had felt walking down the aisle. Word spread quickly among relatives. At gatherings weeks later, people still brought it up. "Did you see the look on Patricia's face?" they whispered. Olivia looked like royalty, and they couldn't say a word. Those two deserved every second of that humiliation. Patricia avoided the topic entirely. Victoria pretended it had never happened. But the silence was telling. They no longer mocked me openly. They no longer smirked at my choices. It was as if they finally realized that underestimating me came with consequences. But the best part was not their silence. It was my growth. I no longer doubted myself when I wore something simple. I no longer replayed their laughter in my head at night. I had proven to myself that I was stronger than their cruelty, that I could rise above it without lowering myself to their level. And that kind of strength? It stays with you forever. In the end, I learned that revenge does not always have to be loud. It does not have to be cruel. Sometimes the best revenge is patience. Sometimes it is walking calmly into the fire, knowing you will not burn. And sometimes, it is wearing a gown that speaks louder than words ever could. Months later, Patricia finally approached me during a family gathering. Her voice was soft, almost cautious. "You looked beautiful at the wedding, Olivia," she said, her eyes avoiding mine. I smiled politely. "Thank you." And that was it. That was all that needed to be said. Because we both knew the truth. She had tried to break me. Instead, I had broken her pride. And the memory of that would last far longer than her words ever had. If your in-laws laughed at you and tried to make you feel small, would you forgive them after proving them wrong, or would you let them live with their humiliation forever? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.